Dead.
On its own, number 4. 1 and 7, 17.
Radio Scotland in the southwest. Time for a look at the weather now. Start quite cloudy with patchy rain. Most of the rain will be over Stranraer. Nevertheless, it's quite enough here in the morning.
We'd come home with our Christmas shopping, and I was expecting my mother to come down the next day to stay for Christmas, so I'd got all the washing done and sheets draped over radiators, that sort of thing, to get them dry.
I was kneeling at the fire actually opening Christmas cards, and the dog was just sitting beside me.
My wife was in the kitchen preparing the supper, and I was thinking it was just about time it was ready, and I was hoping that it'll be a nice quiet evening.
The dog started to growl, and she heard the noise long before I did.
There was a casserole on the working top, and it started to vibrate and bounce along. A light bulb came out of the electric socket, and I looked out the front window, and there were globules coming down on fire, flaming down.
There was this tremendous explosion, and this great column of red flame shot, it looked like about a couple of 100 feet into the air.
I could see houses illuminated in flames, and the entire area appeared to be on fire.
Houses blazing, houses silhouetted, smoke rising, flames rising. It was not our town.
Main story, jet crashes in Borders Town. I'm Andrew Glover. Good evening. A Pan Am jumbo jet with 258 people on board has crashed in the centre of Lockerbie in the Borders. No one is thought to have survived. The plane hit a petrol station and 7 houses.
It was December the 21st, and we were returning from partying down in London the night before. About 11 o'clock we put the radio on, and they were talking about this terrible air disaster where this small town was blown to bits. And I said, "Did they say Lockerbie?" Billy replied, "I don't know." So we stopped talking, and we seemed to drive for miles and miles, maybe even creeping up and speeding, thinking, "Come on, mention the name, please." But all they did was talk about the disaster and how the place had burning down and so much destroyed, and the aircraft that was down and what have you. And then Hector Munro was introduced, and we thought, well, must be Lockerbie, he's our MP, it must be Lockerbie, but it was still a long time before they mentioned Lockerbie.
Normal incidents in the fire brigade, you feel that you have control of the situation within minutes. This was just something that nobody could ever imagine what it could be like. I felt so out of control of everything, and I think so did the rest of the firemen. It was a very fearsome thing to start with. You didn't know what was going to happen next. In fact, I thought somebody was bombing the place.
Standing in the garden of a house which is right next to the crash scene, and the whole garden has been burnt to a cinder. It's littered with bits and pieces of the aircraft. And just looking through the window of the house, you can see a scene of Christmas festivity that the family have obviously just abandoned and run for their lives as the plane came down. An eyewitness that I've just spoken to tells of the plane.
So we put the foot down and raced up the road and stopped in at Fortnum Services, because I remembered, oh, there's a police station there, let's try there. So we went in, and fortunately there were a couple of policemen in. We explained our situation. Look, we're from Lockerbie, we're really worried, what information can you give us? And they spent 10 minutes on the phone and came back and said, well, it sounds as though there's two main areas of real damage, and they said Rosebank and Sherwood Crescent. So we thought, oh, you know, the house is maybe gone, because we're just across the road from Sherwood Crescent, just across the road and down a wee township. So we thought, oh, maybe our house is gone, but at least Billy's parents are okay, they're fine. So we got back into the car, you know, we're feeling really good, you know, oh, family's safe. And then we thought, but so-and-so lives there, and such a family lives there, and the whole horror, the disbelief came back. There's no way to explain how we felt when the news came across and it mentioned Lockerbie.
I had no conception of what had happened, and initially I thought it was a sole RAF jet that had crashed during low flying practice. You don't imagine for a minute that you're thinking in terms of 270 people.
We got evacuated out of our houses and we're walking up the street, and somebody said it was a big plane and all these passengers were killed. Some of my friends from Sherwood were missing.
I saw the houses of people that I had known for a long time literally going up in smoke. I walked along towards them as aircraft debris in the pavement, in the road. You think to yourself, is this where I live? A combination of noise, smoke, fire. It was a very strange situation which had resulted in the deaths of people that I knew. The deaths were school children that you had taught, and it's really a very harrowing thing and not at all in keeping with Lockerbie, where I suppose in international terms nothing ever happened, and here is this sudden imposition. There are people who have the fuselage of a huge aircraft literally in their back gardens. There are others whose houses have just been absolutely pulverised.
Heard about people saying the end of the world is nigh, and that is what I thought it maybe was. I wondered what I should do. I thought maybe I would be better out in company. So I picked up my dog and put her under my arm, and I went to my back door, but I couldn't open it, and as I was trying to open it, the lights went out, and then my house started to shake and fall down, and there was this terrible pulling at me. I think as the front of the house had gone out, it causes a vacuum or something like that. And I held on to the door in the fridge, and it went on for quite a wee while, and then everything went quiet. For a minute or two I didn't know whether I was still alive and everything was so quiet, but I didn't know what to do. So I thought I'd better try and get out the house, and I leaned over to a cupboard and got a pan out and hit the glass in my kitchen door, and knocked off as much of the glass out as I could, and I leaned out and there wasn't a sound anywhere. I was almost afraid to shout. In fact, I was very, very polite. I was saying, could somebody please come and help me and my wee dog? And there was no answer. And then I heard somebody shouting quite rude words, like, but they were lovely to hear. And he's saying, she's alive, come and help me. I could hear this chap is saying.
Sherwood was going up just like a mushroom, an atomic effect. The whole night sky just seemed to light up, and the strong smell of kerosene in the air, and it just got nearer and nearer, a bright orange colour. So we closed the door and we come in and we clung on to one another. We basically thought, well, the whole place is going to go up. This is it. I don't think I've ever been as frightened in all my life. We just basically clung to one another and just basically waited. And after we'd calmed down, I happened to come through into the back kitchen here, and the windows was broken, the door was blown in, and with the light, the orange sky, I could see Ella's house here. And I says to Mary, gosh, there must have been an explosion, Mary. I says, Ella's house isn't there anymore.
Well, just standing in the garden, I looked up, and all I could see in one of my wee bedrooms was nothing but a wardrobe. And in that bedroom, my two grandsons had been sleeping that morning. And all I kept thinking was, thank goodness they were away. They'd gone away 12 o'clock that day.
We could see the flames rolling, boiling up into the sky, and then we heard the noises around us. It was difficult to judge where they were coming from in the darkness and windy night, and the pheasants began to cackle in the wood. It was almost like bombs going off, and just a thump, thump, thump in the darkness. We wondered what to do first and moved out in the fields, and here there was pieces everywhere, which we had never noticed just as we come out. Again, we were still thinking it was a cargo plane, and then we come on a case and a girl's belongings and shoes lying, and then we realised it must be a passenger plane. We gradually moved down the fields with a torch, finding first one thing and another, food trolleys, video projectors from the inside of the plane. And in the moonlight, my son and I gradually moved apart. And it was then I heard him really scream, and I knew he'd found what we feared. He'd come across a seat with a body still strapped in it. My courage returned as I kind of run towards the seat, not knowing what to do or what we were going to do. But the man was obviously dead, cold, and that was just within a quarter of an hour of the accident happening. We searched a wee bit further, moving back towards the house, because we knew then we needed help. But as I say, we had no phone. It had been cut, all the phones around here had been cut off, and the electric was off. And it was then I think we realised just how remote we were. We always enjoy the loneliness and quietness up here, but that night we just seemed to be so far from help and so far from everybody. We heard on the car radio then of what the jumbo had come down in Lockerbie, and began to realise just how serious things were. When we started this search again, we set off over the fields with the Land Rover, and it was just one piece of wreckage after another we were coming across, and then the cases. Most of the luggage from the front of the plane landed here, spread over our hill, and it was the pieces of the plane was one thing, but the luggage was another, and every name you read, you knew that you were looking at somebody's life that had been suddenly halted, some family broken up. It really was sad to find the luggage. And at that time we still had the thought there may be a survivor. We searched that whole night. The police come about 1 o'clock in the night, during the night, and we went right over the hill, but there was another body and limbs, but we always felt there could be a survivor.
Whoever thought of putting a phone in a box? Hats off to them. A phone you only pay for when you want to talk. A payphone. No contracts, no bills. Simple. A payphone in a box. Such a great idea. Somebody's done it again.
Pay as you talk. The mobile phone in a box from Vodafone. No contracts, no bills. Just top-up cards for network access and calls. So to pay as you talk, the word is Vodafone.
Where's the way out?
So you were sick last week, were you?
Apparently you felt terrible.
I had the flu. But when David spoke to you on Friday afternoon, you seemed all right.
I was beginning to feel better.
You said you had the flu. We're talking temperature, aches, shivers, headaches. Yet you were able to pick your way through the finer points of Far Eastern futures. I'd love to hear your explanation.
Lemsip Max Strength. Next time you're ill, you try it.
Lemsip Max Strength. Hard-working medicine. Now available in capsules.
At Curry's now, Sky Digital Satellite TV brings you Britain's widest choice of quality channels. Curry's, the digital choice for you.
Commercial Union and General Accident
are now CGU. That's the background. Here's the future.
I have an announcement to make. I don't just color my hair. I protect it with new Excellence Cream from L'Oreal, the non-drip color cream. Of course it protects, always has, but new Excellence is even better. With a ceramide and protein formula leaving your hair looking revitalized with a richer color, incredible body, more oomph. And does it ever cover grays? Not that I ever had any. New Excellence Cream from L'Oreal. Because I'm worth it.
Come on, mate! Give yourself up! You're surrounded!
There is an animal that has fingerprints almost identical to our own.
Come on, that's it. Come on, come on, come on.
Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
Three o 30. All the twos 22. 3 and 4 34. By itself number 5. 6 and 4 64. 6 and 9 69. 7 and 4 74.
Doctors were arriving from all over the country. In fact, obviously our local general practitioners round about came first of all, and many of them were there with all their emergency kit, but people were arriving from different hospital units, and that was the pattern that was to be for the next few hours, that there would be a regular sort of influx of doctors and nurses and emergency medical teams from other areas all coming to try and assist.
When we started searching the hills looking for survivors, it was a strange night. It was a strong westerly wind, quite cool, sleeting. The higher you got, the colder it got. You send the dog away working, send them to go and find. And the first time Donna came back, she had a tail between her legs, which to me said that she'd found a body, and there was no life in that body. And we went in, and she's in and out barking, but the tail's always between her legs and her ears are down. So she wanted to take me there, but she was at the same time telling me that the person wasn't alive. When I got there, it was a young girl, probably late teens, early 20s, I don't really know. And she was similar build, similar hair colouring, even down to the hair length of my wife. And it made you take stock for a minute or two, just to realise that you'd actually found somebody that was dead. You're not really supposed to touch bodies, but it was a case of making sure, confirming she was dead, and you realised that the neck was broken. But she wasn't stone cold, so obviously she hadn't been there a long time. And then after about another half hour searching, we kept on finding bodies here, there and everywhere. Sometimes parts of bodies, sometimes intact bodies, sometimes they were fully clothed, other times they weren't. Easy to say now. At the time you just learnt to switch off because the job needed doing, and you just got on with the job you were doing. We came across a group of 3 people in a set of seats, still fastened in. And the one thing I'll always remember is the 2 girls. They were dressed in black, and they were absolutely wrapped tight round one another. And I say, people think it's strange that you have to touch them, but you do have to convince yourself that they are dead. Their eyes were wide open, and they had the fingers crossed.
The ambulance radio crackled into life that there was possibly someone alive 3 or 4 miles out of town at a place called Tundergarth, and I drove through Lockerbie, which by this time was just a seething mass of people running everywhere, trying to gather up friends and relatives. But I eventually got through the crowds and up towards Tundergarth. My headlights immediately picked out the shape of the front part of a large aircraft, which I recognised was a jumbo jet, and I then managed to sort of crawl in where best I could to examine the individuals who were in the aircraft, and they were all dead on examination.
You're so busy trying to find somebody that you could help. There's nobody. I felt a terrible guilt, actually. I think the media tended to blow you up into heroes and everything. And you'd done nothing, really.
I came down late morning and there were TV crews, the American ambassador, and various other people being interviewed. The town was humming.
There was this particular night, there were two outside the door and they were desperate to get information, and we wouldn't give them anything, but we gave them food because they were starving. But nobody talked to them.
You didn't discuss the disaster unless it was maybe behind closed doors, because if you stopped to talk to somebody in the street, you suddenly found a reporter at your, oh, where were you, what were you doing, and people didn't want to do that. It was weird for a long time, this feeling, oh, these people round about you that were strangers. So again, it drew the community, the close community together, but I think they were trying to keep everybody else out. Drew a shield round everybody, anybody that had been hurt or anybody that had lost people. There was this net suddenly closed round them to protect them from the media, and I mean, we knew who they were. We weren't telling anybody who they were, no.
Well, as radiographers, we were called in to help with the forensic side of the investigation, and also to try and help identification. We're working with badly damaged humans, but we're working to try and bring them back to life, whereas in this job we knew we had no hope of that, and they were somebody's loved one, and we were trying to treat them with great respect, and I hope we did. I would go over in my mind what I'd seen, what I'd done, and the horrors of it, and a lot of the time I would end up at the cemetery, especially the first few months. I was there, once a week or something, I'd end up there with the dogs, and I would just stand and look and remember and think about the poor families that were so devastated and missing their loved ones, and just going through that horror of the side of things. But I would get some peace because I would think of them. I would try and think of these people I had worked with as living beings and having had enjoyed life, and it gave me great comfort just to go and visit them at the cemetery. And this went on through the first year, but it eased as my pain eased. My trips to the cemetery eased without me being conscious of it, until I suddenly realised, it's quite a long time, it's a couple of months since I've been up to the cemetery. I hadn't appreciated how I was using that as a means of unwinding from the horrors of everything I had seen, and it was a very strange thing how I was able to share with these dead people my memories of them with them.
I had been a policeman for 28 years, and although I had seen death in any way that's imaginable, really, from suicides and murders, shootings, drownings, you name it, I had seen it. And to me, this was just beyond belief that there was so much. And I was obviously concerned for all the young officers that was there, because they obviously were really shattered with the consequences of it.
The next days and weeks were quite a conflict between my own duties as a serving police officer and also the interests of my family as victims, and trying to match the two up, which was very difficult at the time. I was actually working on Christmas Day. I was working 12-hour shifts for several months afterwards. But I remember my wife telling me that they spent most of Christmas Day, my wife and two children, watching soldiers with black bin liners scouring the ground outside the house, looking for body remains. Christmas, we decided we'd give the children Christmas Day. Felt we owed it to them. But Christmas came and went, and the tree came down on Boxing Day, and that was the end of that.
It seems strange that Christmas could be happening at a time like this, when there was so much sadness about.
We took the decorations down, we took the Christmas trees down, and that happened all over Lockerbie. Now, normally kids on Christmas Day, they love it, like they get their new bicycles out, their skates out, you name it, and they're out in the street, running up and down cheering. We didn't have that.
Christmas did not exist at that point. That was it, finished. Had put the Christmas tree up that day. The next day the Christmas tree was out. We decided we'd go to Dumfries to get messages for the Christmas dinner and the food and such like. Went across to Dumfries, and it was so different. You got to Dumfries and it was Christmas trees and there was Christmas carols in the shops, and everybody was sort of bouncing about, and you're thinking, you don't realise there's all these people lying dead along the road there, and you're happy in that. And I thought, oh no, it doesn't matter about Christmas, just let's go home. And when you came back into the town, you could feel it. You could feel sort of the gloom sort of descending upon you as you came in, but you actually felt maybe slightly happier, if that's weird, to be home, because you were home and you were safe and you knew what was going on round about you, where otherwise it was sort of artificial. It was just not Christmas.
All the school meals teams came. We had to organise shifts because there had to be somebody in the kitchen day and night. So that's one of the reasons I was up, walking up the street at 4 o'clock in the morning with the police escort one morning. He met me and says, "Where on earth are you going?" I said, "I'm going to work to feed you lot." So he walked me up the street a bit because it was quite eerie. And we were all uptight, of course. We were abnormal in many ways. And there's no way anybody could sleep because there were the lorries, there were still helicopters going around. We'd just get into bed and it was boom, boom, boom. That was something away back there. So I just got up and went away back up the kitchen and did what I could.
Then they asked if people would wash the searchers' clothes, because if they were coming in off the hills they were covered in mud and such like. So I put my name forward for that. So every morning about 10 o'clock they would land at the door with a black poly bag, and it would have whatever, maybe jeans and 2 or 3 shirts and socks. You had to have them washed and returned. Well, they collected them at 10 o'clock the following morning, which I did for as long as the searchers were here. Then in the middle of March I got a phone call to say that they were setting up this laundry for the clothes that had been found in the hillside, to get them prepared to send them back home to their relatives. So they phoned me and asked me if I would do that, which I said yes, no problem. So I started there. I was looking at my diary today and I started there on the 20th of March. It was my first day when I went in. And the inspector that was in charge, police inspector that was in charge, said that day, he said, "You'll be here to Christmas." And I'm thinking, "You're silly, didn't be so stupid, we'll not be here to Christmas." And it was the 22nd of November was the last day that I came out of the laundry. We had to check everything, wash everything. We found Teddy this day. Teddy came out of a bag. He'd been in the bag for months, for 2 or 3 months, and he was lovely. So we put him in the tumble dryer and out he came after 2 or 3 spins and sat on the window ledge, and we all talked to Teddy as we went past. And I was returned to the girl's sister who'd had a little boy. It was weird at times. It could be quite trying. You'd come home at night and think, "Oh my God," and you thought, such a waste.
Spend Christmas with style in Londonderry. Shop till you drop with the widest selection of shops in the Northwest. From high street names to exclusive local stores, you'll discover everything from fashion to food, special gift ideas to seasonal wares, all dressed up with the city's famous Christmas spirit. So if you want to spend Christmas with style, this year, have yourself a very Derry Christmas.
It's Pizza in Belfast.
More shops, more choice, more happening.
It's Pizza in Belfast.
More to see, more to do, more fun.
It's Pizza in Belfast.
Sure, you never know who you'll buzz into. By day or by night.
It's Pizza in Belfast.
Come on, catch the Belfast buzz.
Because there's never a good time to get indigestion, Rennie starts working the moment it reaches your stomach. Rennie, for fast, effective relief.
Savage Garden. 3 smash hits. 1 truly great album. Out now.
I have an announcement to make. I don't just color my hair. I protect it with new Excellence Cream from L'Oreal, the non-drip color cream. Of course it protects, always has, but new Excellence is even better. With a ceramide and protein formula leaving your hair looking revitalized with a richer color, incredible body, more oomph. And does it ever cover grays? Not that I ever had any. New Excellence Cream from L'Oreal. Because I'm worth it.
For safer overtaking, the new Honda Accord has one of the most powerful engines in its class. And yet, it's so quiet, it's as if it weren't there. The new Accord. Technology you can enjoy from Honda.
Here's what these editors have to say about Christmas at Homebase.
A living tree gives a really warm welcome and looks beautiful with these great value decorations. An ideal gift for that Christmas stocking. Crystal and glass effects are really big this year. This lovely wreath will add perfect seasonal style.
There are dozens of great value Christmas ideas at Homebase.
It was when we started wandering amongst the luggage and reading the various names and seeing cases just burst open, some everything nicely folded in the case and landed perfect, and then others just scattered everywhere. It really was touching to think that there was a family at the other side of the ocean waiting for that person to arrive. We were amazed too how soft some things had landed. We found a carrier bag with 3 bottles of wine and it just landed, not one broken, just sitting together. There was a lady's handbag beside the road here. You'd have thought it had been just set there. The zip was open on top and her purse was still in it, her hair comb, a sandwich, just personal things just sitting as if it had just been set there. And even cups lying around the lawn, around the house, unbroken, and it fell for 6 miles. It's hard to believe just what happened around us. The thing our thoughts went to most was the bodies that was on the place. It was quite a while before we found the names of the people in that, and we've struck up a friendship with the relatives since. But those first few weeks we shed a lot of tears. I think maybe because it happened in such a quiet place, it seems all the more unbelievable. If we'd lived beside an airport, maybe you would expect these type of things, but these things don't happen up here.
The arrival of the Americans was very much a culture shock for Lockardians, but the response of local people was tremendous, because remember that they didn't know what to do. They'd never faced this before. Complete strangers who are obviously absolutely grief-stricken and bereft turn up, and they need support and they need help.
These shattered families walking about the streets of Lockerbie, some of them hardly able to walk, so consumed by grief and anguish that they were helping one another, and they, out of compassion, went out and led them into their own houses and sat them down, maybe gave them a cup of tea or coffee, or did anything they could
to ease the suffering of these sad people. A young mother, she had 2 children. She lived in New York. Her husband was an executive in one of the big international companies, and the company had organised a conference in Europe. Now, this lady's husband didn't need to go to this conference, but he thought it would stand him in good stead for promotion if he did. But his wife was determined that that particular Christmas he would be with her. He had been absent in other Christmases. So for the weeks prior to the conference, they argued together, but no, he was determined. What came first? And then, on the night before he was due to fly out, for the last time, she begged him and pleaded with him not to go, but no, he was going. And in the morning, taxi came to run him to the airport, and when he went to put his arm around his wife and kiss her goodbye, she pushed him away and wouldn't kiss him. That fact festers in that poor woman's brain, and probably even to this day is something that she'll never be able to come to terms with.
Terrorism is a fact of life in the world that we live in. The big outside world invaded one December night.
It was murder, wasn't it? It wasn't an accident in the true sense of the word, like a roadway accident or a farm accident or whatever.
The Lockerbie disaster was the largest mass murder that was taking place in the United Kingdom.
The after effects were bound to happen. Mood swings, bad temper, very short fuse. If we were getting called to go somewhere, he used to drive faster than he'd ever driven before. And looking back now, maybe a little too fast, but there were no accidents, nobody was hurt, so we got away with it. And it took probably another 2 years to come out of it properly. Even now we get flashbacks. At the time, straight afterwards, daft as it seems, some of the voices were from the bodies that we'd found actually talking to us, saying hello and all sorts of things. And these days the only real flashback I get is of the first body. That's still in bright colour, but all the rest is just in straight black and white. But you learn that you can't forget it, you shouldn't forget it, and you've just got to live for tomorrow. You can't live in the past.
One of our functions was to talk to them. All you did was try and start them and let them do the talking, because they were the ones who were really needing to talk, because they were having experiences which, pray God, they never will have again, and had for the one and only time at that time, and it was having a considerable effect on them.
It must have been about 3 months after before I could smile at anything, even things on the television that were comedies and such like, things that I usually loved. And I couldn't bring a smile to my face.
It has bothered me over the years. I gave the fire service up a few months after that.
There was a whole range of symptoms, from sleeplessness, re-experiencing the event and flashbacks. All the time this feeling of dread that something terrible was about to happen. Certainly my ability to function at work was impaired with concentration. And that was okay as long as I wasn't subjected to any further stressors or outside stress. And I still knew within myself, things weren't getting better. You could question how the whole thing was handled at the time by the police, with the management of it. Although I have to say, I think Lockerbie was unprecedented. No one had actually dealt with a disaster on that scale then, so that's maybe understandable. I would like to think lessons have been learned. Things will be handled differently now and in the future.
One of the hardest things to come to terms with was the fact that life's going on all the time. Life might have stopped still for you and all the others involved in the plane crash, but outside the immediate area, life was just carrying on as normal. And it was just a case of the shock of coming back to work afterwards and realising that it's not that other people weren't affected, but things just had to go on. And that was probably the hardest thing to come to terms with.
People still remember what has happened. They still feel very sorry that it ever happened. But they have tried to keep Lockerbie as it was. And they've tried to keep the spirit of Lockerbie, I think, as it was, almost as a mark of respect for the people who died. Nothing has been allowed to change that much.
Lockerbie people have survived this very well, and they really now just want to say 10 years on, let's finish with it.
I've also thought, do I want to remember? And I've decided, yes, I do want to remember. It's important. Nobody ever forgets the horrors of things like Lockerbie or Omagh or that terrible disaster in Canada. Anything terrible, we must remember the horrors of that so that mankind can do something about it and try and prevent it ever happening again. It's just so horrible that anybody should be put through what we were put through and what those families were put through. Never mind the poor victims. Nobody will know what they've been through, but the families that have been left, it must just be horrendous.
I've just looked at it positively now and, as I say, live for tomorrow and definitely not live in the past. It's not that you forget what's happened, but you've got to put it to one side and let life go on.
I don't think it'll ever leave us. I know they say time can be a healer, but it does drift back, and the main thing that drifts back to me is the fear of dying that night, when the whole night air just lit up, and basically we just thought the whole bit was going to blow up.
So I mean, we've came through that, so and we'll survive. I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will.
It's now the 10th anniversary of the disaster, and I suppose in a way it's a way of drawing a line under it and affecting some sort of closure on the whole experience.
The people around the place of a tragedy, it does something to them in their life that they'll never forget. We're left with a scar, as it were,